1996. A kitchen in a suburban house, 9:47 p.m., a Tuesday. A girl, 16 years old, sits on the floor with her back against the cabinet, the telephone cord stretched all the way across the linoleum from the wall outlet to her ear. The cord is coiled and twisted. She's been winding it around her finger for 2 hours straight. Her mother has already walked through the kitchen twice, silently mouthing, "Wrap it up." Her little brother is upstairs, and he can't call anyone, because there's one line in the house and it's tied up by his sister right now. If someone tries to call this house at this moment, they'll hear a busy signal. Not an answering machine, not a message, just a tone that, without a single word of explanation, says, "Try later." She doesn't know whether the boy she likes is thinking about her. She won't find out until tomorrow at school, because no other way of finding out exists. She sits in complete, unbroken silence. She is doing the most important psychological work of her adolescence, waiting, not knowing, sitting inside a question whose answer will not arrive in 4 seconds. This one single evening on the kitchen floor, repeated 10,000 times in 10,000 houses, built a nervous system that the modern person simply does not have. Here are 15 ordinary experiences that every American over 30 had, simply because they lived before a certain year. None of them required money. None of them required effort. Almost no one under 30 has lived through a single one of them. Not once, not even by accident. And we're going to talk about why that matters. Not for the sake of nostalgia, but for the sake of what kind of people it shaped, and what kind of people the absence of it is shaping now. Subscribe before we begin. And write in the comments whether you ever lived through this even once in your life, and what gave you great pleasure. And here we go. Number 15. The busy signal. If you called someone and the line was busy, you didn't get a notification. You heard a flat, harsh tone that meant nothing was going to happen. Not now, not automatically in 5 minutes, not ever, until you personally dialed the number again. Until the late 80s, most homes didn't have call waiting, and even after it appeared, most families didn't pay for it. So if the line was busy, you were simply cut off from that person's life until they hung up the phone themselves. You couldn't leave a voicemail. Most homes didn't have an answering machine either. You just tried again, and again, sometimes for a whole hour. The modern person has never once in their life been refused by technology, and simply accepted it. Every app today queues your message, delivers it the second a signal appears, marks it delivered, marks it read. Nothing is ever refused just like that. The busy signal taught an entire generation that access to another person is not a right, but a condition dependent on circumstances that cannot be worked around. Number 14. The role of film. A person in 1985 took a photo with a real camera, on real film with 36 frames, and then didn't see that photo. Not an hour later, not a day later. They took the film to the drugstore, filled out a little envelope, and came back for the pictures anywhere from 1 hour, if they paid extra, to a whole week if they didn't. The entire time, they didn't know whether the shot had come out, didn't know whether someone's eyes were closed, whether the flash had washed out the whole frame, whether the composition worked at all. Reshoots didn't exist. There were 36 attempts, total, for an entire vacation, an entire wedding, an entire childhood summer, and you found out how they turned out only when the moment was long over and couldn't be recreated. This bred a strange, disciplined attentiveness. You looked hard at what you were shooting, because you literally had one try. The modern person takes 100 photos of a sunset and deletes 99 of them in a single moment, without really lingering on a single one. Number 13. Television on a schedule. If a person in 1990 wanted to watch a specific show, they had to be in front of the television at exactly the time the channel assigned. Thursday 8 p.m. precisely. Not 8:03. Not whenever they felt like it later. Missed the broadcast, and they lost it irretrievably, unless a rerun aired months later, and there was no way to know about it in advance. A live broadcast couldn't be paused. It couldn't be rewound. If you got up to answer the door, you missed what happened, and nobody could tell you about it, because everyone missed it at the very same instant, because the whole country was watching the same broadcast simultaneously. This created something the modern viewer has never felt: 40 million strangers at once, silently, watching the same thing in the same moment, and the next day going to school or work already sharing one common memory. The modern person watches what they want, when they want, alone, and never once in their life has had a show interrupted by real, irreplaceable time. Number 12. Taping a song off the radio. If a person in 1988 wanted a specific song but didn't have the money for the album, They sat by the radio with a blank cassette already loaded, a finger hovering over the record and play buttons at the same time, and waited. The DJ would announce the song was coming up, and you had about 4 seconds to hit record before the first note. Hesitate, and you got the song without its beginning. Rush, and you got 3 seconds of the DJ's voice cutting into the start. There was no undoing a recording. Getting a clean recording of a favorite song required patience, precision, and often 3 or 4 failed attempts recorded over one another on the same worn-out cassette. The modern person types in the exact name of a song and hears it, whole and flawless, in under 2 seconds, and has never once accepted a scratchy, imperfect copy of a beloved thing as the only one they would ever have. Number 11. Finding information. If a person in 1993 had a question, a real one, who was the 11th president, how far away the moon is, what the word grandiloquent means, they didn't ask a device. They got up, walked to the shelf, and pulled down a real, leather-bound volume of the encyclopedia, printed months or years ago, and the answer might be there, or it might not. If it wasn't, the next step became a real public library, a building, a librarian who might spend 20 minutes with you tracking down the answer through a card catalog. The whole process could take an entire day for a single fact. And precisely because it took a day, you remembered the answer. Because you had earned it. The modern person asks a question out loud to a device on the kitchen counter and forgets the answer 11 seconds later. Because it came for free, which means there's nothing to lose. Number 10. Getting lost and staying lost for a while. A person driving to an unfamiliar city in 1991 used a paper map, folded 12 times, spread out on the passenger seat or on the steering wheel at a red light. Miss a turn, and there was no voice to recalculate the route. They pulled into a gas station and asked a stranger behind the counter for directions, in person, out loud, trusting that stranger's memory of streets they might not have driven in years. Being lost was a real, physical, sometimes hour-long condition, not a 5-second hiccup fixed by a satellite. It required humility, because it required asking another person for help, face to face, admitting out loud that you didn't know where you were. The modern person has never once asked a stranger for directions and therefore has never once practiced that particular, useful humility, being visibly wrong in front of another person. Number 9. Waiting for someone to be home. If you needed to reach your father at work urgently in 1987, you called the office number, and if he wasn't at his desk, someone wrote a message on a little pink slip and tucked it under a stapler, and he got it the next time he happened to walk past his desk, maybe 40 minutes later. There was no way to reach a specific person wherever they physically happened to be on Earth. People were reachable only in certain places, at certain times, at certain numbers written down in a little book by the phone. This meant that for most of every day, a person was simply unreachable, off the grid, not through any special effort but by default, because that's how a person's life was arranged. The modern person is obligated to be reachable at any moment, in any place, and the very fact of not answering within an hour is read by others as a decision, as a message, as a small act of aggression. Unreachability used to be the air everyone breathed. Now it has to be defended like territory. Number 8. A paper letter. A person writing to a friend who had moved away in 1982 sat down with real paper, wrote in their own handwriting, folded the letter, sealed it in an envelope, licked a stamp, and walked to the mailbox, and then waited. 3 days, 5 days, sometimes 2 weeks, if the friend had moved abroad. The whole time there was no read receipt, no typing indicator, no way to know whether the letter had even arrived. You put something honest and vulnerable into an envelope and released it into the system with complete trust and zero confirmation. And when a reply came, months of an entire friendship sometimes fit into 3 handwritten pages, read slowly, at the kitchen table, sometimes more than once. The modern person sends a message and feels real anxiety if 3 gray dots don't appear within 90 seconds. No one under 30 has ever once released words into total silence, and simply trusted that silence. Number 7. Saving up, in cash, in a jar. A child in 1989 who wanted something, a bike, a boombox, sneakers, couldn't just get it by splitting it into 4 interest-free payments with a single tap. They set aside part of their allowance or their paper route earnings in a real jar, actually counted the bills, actually watched the sum grow, dollar by dollar, over months, and that long, physical, counted out wanting was half the experience itself. When there was finally enough, They walked into the store holding it in their own hand, and the moment of purchase became the reward for months of real, felt patience. The modern person sees a thing on a screen and gets it, ordered, paid for, delivered tomorrow, in under 90 seconds, and so has never trained that particular, character-forming muscle, wanting something badly for 4 whole months before being granted permission to have it. Number 6. Being truly, completely bored. A child in 1986 on a rainy Saturday with no plans at all sat in a room where there was nothing interesting on a screen yet again, and there was no phone at all, and simply had to endure an encounter with their own mind for a few hours. They stared at the ceiling, rummaged through a drawer for no reason, invented an elaborate game with a deck of cards missing 3 of them. This wasn't rest. It was uncomfortable, and it was precisely in that discomfort that something important happened, a real, original thought, prompted by no one, born entirely inside one's own skull, because there was nothing else at hand to fill the emptiness. The modern person has never once in their life been left alone with an unfilled hour, because the device that instantly answers boredom existed before they can even remember. Boredom used to be the soil in which creativity sprouted. Now that soil has been paved over before the first seed even had a chance to fall into it. Number 5. The answering machine. A person coming home in 1992 opened the door and saw a little blinking red light, and that blinking light was, for a few seconds, the only information in the world about who had tried to reach them all day. They pressed play and heard a real human voice, recorded in real time, sometimes halting, sometimes nervous, leaving a real message with no edit button, because once you started talking, you were obligated to carry the sentence through to the end, however it came out. People accidentally left funny messages, accidentally awkward ones, accidentally sincere ones, because the format didn't allow you to edit yourself down to something safer. The modern person types a message, deletes it, rewrites it 3 times, and sends a version of themselves polished until nothing honest remains. No one under 30 has ever once heard that particular, unrehearsed sound of another person's real voice. Caught mid-thought, with no way to take the words back. Number 4. Losing something forever. A house fire, a flood, a bad move in 1980 could genuinely destroy the only copies of an entire family's photographic history, in a single day, irretrievably, with no second copy anywhere on Earth. There was no cloud. There was no second copy sitting on a server in another state. If the shoebox burned, the memory of what your grandmother looked like at 25 burned with it, and it was truly over, in the full and final sense of the word, not over until you find the right app. This gave paper photographs a weight the modern person has never once felt, because their entire visual history is stored in 3 copies, in 3 countries, automatically, without any choice of their own. A family in 1980 protected their photographs the way you protect something that can genuinely die. The modern person has never protected anything, because nothing that belongs to them can be lost anymore. Number 3. Privacy that no one granted. It simply existed. A teenager in 1994, home alone after school, wasn't tracked by a phone in their pocket, didn't show up as a dot on a map in a parent's app, left no digital trace of a single thing they did between 3 and 6 in the afternoon. If they rode a bike to a friend's house, climbed a tree, said something stupid to a classmate on an ordinary phone, cried on the porch over something trivial, none of it was recorded, screenshotted, stored, or capable of surfacing 10 years later. Their mistakes belonged only to the people physically present for them, and then slowly, to no one, as memory faded the way it's supposed to fade. The modern young person has never had a single unrecorded day in their entire life. Every stupid thing they ever said exists somewhere, forever, waiting for its moment. Privacy used to be the default setting for childhood. Now it's a feature you have to wrest back from your own devices. Number 2. Arguing with someone you can't walk away from. A family in 1985 arguing at the dinner table couldn't mute one another, couldn't block one another, couldn't just close an app and move to another, more agreeable room of the internet where everyone already thinks exactly the way you do. If an uncle said something you found hateful, you sat at that table and either learned to out-argue him with your own words in real time, or learned to bite your tongue and pass the potatoes. And either way, day after day, you learned something about living in physical closeness with people who disagreed with you and weren't going anywhere. The modern person can filter every voice so thoroughly that literally no one in their daily feed disagrees with them about anything, and may well go weeks without encountering an opinion that wasn't already their own. No one under 30 has ever once been made to sit at a real table across from real disagreement, and stay in the room anyway. And number 1. The skill that all the other 14 were quietly leading toward. A person who grew up before the mid-90s could, by the time they were 20, tolerate not knowing. They could sit with an unresolved question, an unanswered call, an undeveloped roll of film, a letter that hadn't arrived yet and was still 4 days away, and not experience that gap as an emergency. They were trained every day of childhood, in small, mundane, unremarkable situations, to live inside uncertainty without panicking, because uncertainty was what nearly every day was mostly made of. That tolerance is not a personality trait. It's a muscle, built up by 10,000 small repetitions of waiting for something that couldn't be sped up. The modern person, who grew up entirely inside instant answers, instant delivery, instant message replies, instant everything, never did those repetitions. And so an unread message at 11:47 p.m. can feel to their body like a genuine crisis. Not because the situation is dangerous, but because the muscle that was supposed to absorb the waiting was simply never built. That's the real cost. Not nostalgia for cassettes or paper maps. The quiet loss of a nervous system able to hold a question all night without breaking. If you're over 30, you didn't choose any of this. It was just the water you grew up in. Free, ordinary, no courses, no coach, no diploma. The busy signal taught patience. The blank cassette taught precision. The blinking red light taught you what an unedited human voice actually sounds like. The jar of coins taught you what it actually feels like to want something for 4 months, feeling it in your chest. No one taught you these lessons on purpose. They were simply the shape of an ordinary Tuesday in a world that hadn't yet learned to eliminate every gap between a person and the thing they want. The people who grew up that way are now in their 30s, 40s, 50s. Watch them in a waiting room, at a delayed departure gate, in a line that isn't moving. On average, they're calmer than the people 20 years younger standing right next to them. Not because they're better as people, because they were trained, without realizing it, in the oldest and most vanishing skill a person can possess. The ability to simply wait, paying nothing for it, for something that can't be made to arrive any faster. Somewhere right now, in some house, a phone is ringing, and the call goes to an answering machine, and the message blinks, unheard, for another 6 hours, because no one in that house had a device in their pocket announcing the incoming call. And in those 6 hours, without a single notification, something ordinary, human, and slightly old-fashioned is still quietly happening. It happens less and less, but it still happens. Subscribe for more videos and write below which of these points you lived through yourself.